The companies that run your world were never private. They were built by the same people who built your weapons. The internet was not invented in a garage. It was invented in a war room. And the companies you think define Silicon Valley's origin story, Google, Facebook, the entire digital infrastructure of your life, they did not emerge from genius college dropouts. They emerged from a 60-year intelligence project that has never been fully disclosed to the public. Never private, always military. Buried in declassified documents is a pattern of agreements. A network of deals that transferred the most powerful surveillance architecture in human history from government hands into the hands of 20-something founders in hoodies. I will show you exactly what those deals look like. But the reason they were hidden from you for decades, that is not what you think. If you are ready to hear an uncomfortable truth about the devices you trust with your most private thoughts, stay until the final minute. If not, this video is not for you. In the next 12 minutes, you will never see Silicon Valley the same way again, because the secret history of how Silicon Valley became the most powerful government on Earth starts not in a California garage. It starts in a Pentagon budget meeting in 1958. And by the end of this video, you will understand why the most powerful surveillance state in human history does not wear a uniform. It wears a hoodie. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, a small metal ball beeping from orbit. And in Washington, the panic was immediate, not because of the satellite itself, but because of what it proved. If the Soviets could put a satellite in space, they could put a nuclear warhead anywhere on Earth. The United States realized, almost overnight, that it had a catastrophic information problem. So in 1958, President Eisenhower created DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Its mission, prevent technological surprise. Its budget, whatever it needed. And its first major project was not a weapon, it was a network. A communication system so distributed that even a nuclear strike could not destroy it. They called it ARPANET. ARPANET was not a gift to the world. It was a military contingency plan. By 1969, 4 universities were connected. By 1972, email existed. By 1983, the TCP/IP protocols that run the entire modern internet were classified military specifications. The internet you use right now, the one that powers every company in Silicon Valley, was born inside a defense contract. As investigative journalist Yasha Levine documented in his book Surveillance Valley, the internet was a weapon. It was always a weapon, and the idea that it became something else. That is the story they want you to believe. The weapon did not stay in the Pentagon, but where it went next is where this story gets truly dark. Stop and think about this for a second. Every tech founder mythology starts in the same place. Stanford University, Hewlett and Packard, Page and Brin. The mythology is meritocracy, brilliant students, free markets, pure innovation. But Stanford's relationship with the military goes back to a calculated decision made in 1946 by a man named Frederick Terman. Terman was Stanford's Dean of Engineering. After World War II, he made a deliberate choice. Turned Stanford into a hub for military research contracts. He personally recruited professors from East Coast universities with one pitch. The Pentagon will fund your laboratory. And they did. Stanford Military Partnership Contract. By the 1950s, Stanford Research Institute, now called SRI International, was conducting classified research for the CIA, the NSA, and the Department of Defense. It was SRI that developed early work on artificial intelligence, human-computer interaction, and the first computer mouse. Not for consumers, for military command systems. The valley that would produce the world's most valuable companies was, from its very first days, a classified military research zone. This was not a coincidence. It was architecture. Terman's model, university freedom plus military funding, became the blueprint for what we now call Silicon Valley. The same model that produced the atomic bomb produced the ecosystem that produced your smartphone. And if this disturbs you as much as it should, hit like and subscribe, because we are just getting started. What I am about to reveal goes far deeper than a university funding deal. But here is where the story takes a dark turn. Most people assume venture capital, the money that funds Silicon Valley startups, is private money. Risk-tolerant investors betting on brilliant founders. And that is mostly true, except for one fund, In 1999, the CIA created its own venture capital firm, not a front company, not a covert operation hidden behind shell corporations, a publicly acknowledged investment fund that to this day operates out of Arlington, Virginia. In-Q-Tel's stated mission is to invest in technology companies that can provide intelligence value to United States agencies. Since 1999, it has invested in hundreds of companies, many of which you use every day. Keyhole Inc., the mapping company that became Google Earth, In-Q-Tel funding before Google ever acquired it. Palantir, the data analytics firm that tracks populations for governments worldwide. In-Q-Tel seed money. CIA funded your tech. The In-Q-Tel portfolio reads like a catalog of Silicon Valley's most powerful tools. Spatial mapping, facial recognition, predictive analytics, behavioral profiling, real-time location tracking. Technologies that were intelligence requirements first, and consumer products second. As former CIA Director George Tenet described the strategy, we are not trying to replicate the venture capital industry. We are trying to use it to access technologies that would otherwise take us decades to build internally. When technology comes from a CIA laboratory, it is called surveillance. When it comes from a San Francisco startup with CIA backing, it is called innovation. And the next investment, the one that changed everything, is even more audacious than this. Now, what I am about to tell you is completely documented. In 1994, DARPA funded a research program at Stanford called the Digital Libraries Initiative. The goal: index the entirety of human knowledge on the internet and develop algorithms to extract behavioral patterns from that data at scale. Two researchers on that program were Sergey Brin and Larry Page. The algorithm that became Google was funded by a military research grant. The initial Stanford research that formed the backbone of Google's PageRank algorithm was supported by DARPA grant number MDA 972-94G0025. This is not conspiracy. It is documented in the original academic papers. Page and Brin explicitly acknowledged the funding in their first published research. Google DARPA funded documented, but the connection goes deeper than a grant number. Documents uncovered by Yasha Levine show that intelligence analysts were particularly interested in the sociological implications of indexing human behavior at scale, not just finding information, understanding who was searching for what, building a real-time map of human curiosity, fear, and intent. A behavioral database unlike anything that had ever existed. And here is what nobody tells you about Google's earliest investors: Sequoia Capital and Kleiner Perkins, Google's first major institutional funders. Both had deep, documented connections to In-Q-Tel's advisory network. The money trail runs in a single direction. Now forget everything you assumed about the word startup, because what comes next reveals how this network was formalized into a legal structure that has never been fully dismantled. Let me pause here because this next part changes the entire picture. In 2013, a 29-year-old NSA contractor named Edward Snowden walked out of a Hawaii surveillance facility with 1.5 million classified documents. And what those documents revealed was not just surveillance. It was a partnership, PRISM. That was its code name, a program under which the NSA collected data directly from the servers of 9 major technology companies: Microsoft, Yahoo, Google, Facebook, YouTube, Skype, AOL, and Apple. Not intercepting data in transit, accessing it directly from the source in real time. Your messages, your emails, your photographs, your searches, flowing directly into NSA servers since 2007. 6 years before anyone in the public knew this was happening, and it operated with the full legal knowledge and cooperation of the companies involved. This was not hacking. This was not an intrusion. This was a contract. The NSA had access to the servers of these companies. They did not need to intercept data. They were handed it. PRISM was not surveillance of Silicon Valley. It was surveillance by Silicon Valley, the legal architecture that made PRISM possible. Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act essentially deputized private technology companies as intelligence collectors. They were not victims of government overreach. They were contractors operating under government contracts. And what Silicon Valley received in return for this arrangement is something the mainstream telling of this story has never fully reported. Here is a fact that should stop you cold. The NSA's budget, classified but estimated at approximately $10 billion annually, includes line items for what are described as industry partnerships, payments to private companies for access to their infrastructure. Silicon Valley got money. The NSA got data. Both sides won, but the exchange was not purely financial. What the intelligence community gave Silicon Valley was something more valuable than money: regulatory protection. Since the rise of the internet, technology companies have operated in a remarkable legal vacuum, almost entirely free from antitrust enforcement, from meaningful privacy regulation, from the constraints that broke up Standard Oil, that regulated the railroads, that dismantled AT&T. Protection from all regulation. Researcher Tim Wu documented in his book, The Curse of Bigness, how tech companies were given extraordinary latitude to grow into monopolies that would have been dissolved in any previous era. The question his research raises: why? Why were the same antitrust principles applied to every other industry suddenly inapplicable to tech? One answer, documented in the writings of former intelligence officials, is structural. An intelligence community that depends on Google, Facebook, and Microsoft for its surveillance infrastructure cannot afford to have those companies fragmented. A monopoly Google with universal data access serves intelligence interests perfectly. A fragmented Google serves them poorly. The most valuable surveillance network in history was built with private capital and protected by public power, and the people who enforced that protection: the lobbyists, the policy directors, the government liaisons inside these companies. You will not believe where they actually came from. What I am about to tell you has been documented by the Partnership for Public Service, a nonpartisan research organization that tracks government personnel movement. Between 2001 and 2020, over 1,800 former government officials, from the NSA, CIA, DHS, State Department, and Pentagon, moved directly into senior roles at major technology companies. Not junior roles, senior roles. Vice President of Policy, Director of Global Security, Head of Intelligence Operations. The line between Silicon Valley and the intelligence community is not a line at all. Google employed former NSA Director Keith Alexander as a cybersecurity advisor. Former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice served on its board. Former DARPA Director Regina Dugan ran its secretive ATAP, Advanced Technology Division. Facebook brought in former Homeland Security officials. Amazon hired former CIA Deputy Director Mike Moore. Revolving door, intelligence, tech. These are not coincidences of hiring. They are the formalization of a network. When James Clapper, the former Director of National Intelligence, publicly stated that Silicon Valley is critical national security infrastructure, he was not speaking metaphorically. He was describing a policy framework that has been in place for decades. We rely on the private sector to develop and operate much of our most critical intelligence infrastructure. That is simply the modern reality. And that modern reality has a name. It has a face. And it runs the most powerful population analytics system the Pentagon has ever deployed. What comes next is the purest, most honest expression of everything I have been building toward. If you thought what I just described was the extent of this story, this next company will change your understanding of its scale entirely. Peter Thiel is the founder of PayPal, one of Facebook's earliest investors, and the co-founder of Palantir Technologies. The name comes from the all-seeing stones of the Lord of the Rings, and unlike every other Silicon Valley company, Palantir has never pretended to be something it is not. Palantir's clients include the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, the U.S. Army, and the Marine Corps. Its technology aggregates data from multiple sources simultaneously: social media records, financial transactions, travel logs, facial recognition databases, and produces what the company calls intelligence products, what governments call targeting packages. Palantir's software was used to track terrorists. It was also used to track undocumented immigrants and political protesters. The system does not distinguish between threats and citizens. What separates Palantir from Google or Facebook is that it removed the consumer layer entirely. No advertising model, no free product. Palantir exists solely to provide governments and corporations with population surveillance infrastructure. Palantir watching everyone. And here is the detail that matters most. In-Q-Tel, the CIA's venture capital fund, was Palantir's first institutional investor. The CIA did not just enable this company, it created it. Peter Thiel acknowledged the mission directly. We started Palantir because we thought there had to be a better way to fight terrorism than invading countries. The answer was data. Data is the new territory. And what happens when private companies use that territory to govern what populations are allowed to believe? That is what comes next. It is the darkest chapter in this entire history. Here is where it gets darkest. In 2020, the United States government faced a problem it could not legally solve. Information, true and false, was spreading faster than any agency could manage. The First Amendment prohibited direct government censorship, so they did something more elegant. They outsourced it. Documents released through the Murthy v. Missouri federal lawsuit revealed that the White House, the FBI, the CDC, and the Department of Homeland Security maintained regular communications with Twitter, Facebook, and Google, flagging content for removal, not requesting, flagging. And the companies were complying within hours, often without independent review. The government found a way to censor speech without technically censoring speech. The Twitter files, internal communications released after Elon Musk's 2022 acquisition, showed FBI agents with embedded operational relationships inside Twitter's trust and safety teams. The FBI sent tens of thousands of content flags. Twitter actioned the majority. The First Amendment prohibits the government from censoring you. It does not prohibit a private company from doing it at the government's request. That distinction is now the legal architecture of American speech. Censorship by proxy legal. Former Twitter executive Vijay Gad confirmed under congressional testimony that the company received regular government content requests and had no formal process to refuse them. The infrastructure of speech. Who speaks, who is heard, whose voice is amplified or silenced, is now operated by private companies acting on government guidance. This is the end point of the story that started in 1958 with ARPANET. The network built to survive nuclear war is now used to manage what the population is permitted to believe. Do you think this system is protecting democracy? Or has it already replaced it? Comment protected or captured. I want to know where you stand. Share this with as many people as you possibly can. This truth needs to reach far and wide. Send it to someone who needs to hear this right now. Now, here is the resolution of what I promised you at the start of this video. Not one document. A pattern of documents sitting in public archives, academic footnotes, court discovery filings, and declassified FISA orders. DARPA grant number MDA 972-94G0025. The In-Q-Tel investment portfolio. FISA Court Order 702. The DHS Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency's Misdismail Information Operational Framework. The Murthy v. Missouri Court Discovery. Each one a piece of the picture. Together, they form a conclusion. Silicon Valley is not a private sector alternative to government. It is the government, built with your money. The reason this was hidden is simpler than you thought. It was not hidden to protect national security. It was hidden because the story of Silicon Valley, the garage, the dropout, the disruption, the free market, is one of the most powerful legitimizing myths of the 21st century. If people understood that Google was seeded by DARPA, that Facebook participated in PRISM, that your phone's connectivity was shaped by NSA technical standards, the mythology collapses. 1. DARPA built the internet as a military weapon. 2. CIA funded key technologies through In-Q-Tel. 3. NSA received direct data access from 9 major platforms. 4. The revolving door formalized the intelligence tech network. 5. Censorship was privatized to bypass the First Amendment. As Dwight Eisenhower warned in his farewell address in 1961, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. Was warning about weapons manufacturers. He could not have imagined that 60 years later, the military-industrial complex would own your search engine. Every search you make is indexed. Every location ping is logged. Every behavioral pattern is profiled in a data center you will never visit, owned by a company you cannot audit, accessible to an agency you cannot question. This is not paranoia. This is the documented architecture of the world you actually live in. If you made it all the way here, through all of it, comment silicon surveillance. It tells me you are one of the people who actually wants to know, and knowing is where everything starts. The question is not whether you are being watched. The question is what you do knowing that you are. The secret history of Silicon Valley was never truly secret. It was always there. In grant acknowledgements, in court filings, in the career histories of the people who built these companies. The secret was that nobody connected the dots. Until now. Knowledge is the first step. The most powerful government on earth does not have a flag. It has an app store. It does not have an army. It has a data center. It does not need your vote. It already has your data. Understanding this is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a different relationship with the technology that runs your world. The truth is stranger than anything you could make up.